Imagine you are the last surviving grandson of a king who lost his throne. The new king is popular, powerful, and beloved, and you have been hiding for years, not because you did anything wrong, but because of who your grandfather was. That is where this story begins. When a new dynasty took over in the ancient world, the old royal family did not usually retire peacefully. They were eliminated. This was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was politics. A surviving heir was a rallying point. A surviving heir was a threat, so new kings cleared the line. They made sure no one from the old house could ever challenge them. Mephibosheth grew up knowing this. His grandfather was Saul, the first king of Israel. His father was Jonathan, Saul's eldest son and heir. When Saul's reign collapsed and David rose to power, Mephibosheth was 5 years old. The news came fast that day. Saul was dead. Jonathan was dead. The royal house was gone. His nurse grabbed him and ran. In the panic, he fell. 2 Samuel 4:4 records it plainly. He became lame in both feet. He was 5 years old. They fled to a place called Lo Debar. The name itself is telling. In Hebrew, Lo Debar likely means something close to no pasture or place of no thing. It was not a city of prosperity. It was a place where someone could disappear quietly. And that is exactly what Mephibosheth did. He disappeared. For years. Before we go further, let us go back to Jonathan and David. These two men had one of the most remarkable friendships in the entire Bible. 1 Samuel 18 describes their bond as a covenant. Jonathan loved David as his own soul. That phrase is not casual. In the ancient Near East, covenant language was binding. It carried obligation across generations. Jonathan knew his father Saul was trying to kill David. He protected David anyway. He warned him. He helped him escape. And in 1 Samuel 20:14-17, Jonathan made David promise something specific. He asked David to show him kindness, not just while he lived, but afterward, and not just to him, to his children. He asked David to never cut off that kindness from his family. David made that promise. Jonathan died at the Battle of Jezreel. He never saw David become king. He never saw what David did next, but the promise was still there. And eventually, David remembered. 2 Samuel 9 opens with a question that feels almost out of place in a political narrative. David asks, "Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" The word used there is Hesed. It appears throughout the Hebrew scriptures. It means covenant loyalty. It means committed love. It is not a feeling. It is a decision to act. A servant named Ziba tells David about Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son. Living in Lo Debar, lame in both feet, David sends for him. Now stop here and notice what this moment would have felt like from Mephibosheth's side. Royal messengers arriving at your door. The king wants to see you. In that world, that message almost never meant good things for someone from the old royal house. That message meant you had been found, that the new king had remembered you existed. Mephibosheth had survived by being forgotten, and now he was remembered. He came before David and fell to the ground. The text shows him calling himself a dead dog. That phrase is not just humility. It is the language of someone who genuinely expected to be destroyed. He was prostrating himself the way a condemned man might. He was not performing modesty. He was terrified. And David said, "Do not be afraid." Those 4 words are the turning point of the entire story. Do not be afraid. David did not demand loyalty first. He did not require Mephibosheth to prove his intentions. He did not list the reasons why keeping this man alive was a political risk. He spoke to the fear first. Then he explained why. "For your father Jonathan's sake, I will show you kindness. I will restore to you all the land of your grandfather Saul, and you will eat at my table always." Let us slow down here because this is where many readers move past something important. In the ancient world, eating at the king's table was not just an honor. It was a protected position. To eat at the king's table meant you were under his care, his roof, his provision. It also meant you were visible to him. Monitored, yes, but also guarded. No one could quietly move against you when you sat at the royal table every day. David was not just being generous. He was placing Mephibosheth inside the circle of protection. He was making him visible in the safest possible way. And there is something else happening here. Mephibosheth was lame in both feet. In many ancient Near Eastern cultures, physical disability carried social weight. It could mean exclusion from certain roles, certain spaces, certain forms of belonging. For someone already politically vulnerable, a physical disability added another layer of exposure. He was doubly outside. Politically dangerous to keep and socially easy to dismiss, David restored the land. He called Ziba and his 15 sons and 20 servants to work the land for Mephibosheth. He made full provision. And then the table. Always, not occasionally, not as a guest, as a resident at the royal table. The text ends that section with a quiet detail. He was lame in both feet. The writer includes this again at the end of the chapter. Not to draw attention to his limitation, but because the table seat covered it. When you sit at the king's table, everyone sees a man at the table. The posture of exclusion becomes the posture of belonging. If this kind of explanation helps Scripture feel clearer and more connected, subscribe to Scripture Unfolded for calm Bible explainers like this. No hype, just the story. Now, there is one more chapter to this narrative that often gets overlooked. Years later, David faced one of the darkest moments of his reign. His own son Absalom led a coup. David fled Jerusalem. And in that chaos, 2 Samuel 16 shows Ziba meeting David on the road with supplies. David asked where Mephibosheth was. Ziba told him Mephibosheth had stayed in Jerusalem, hoping to reclaim his grandfather's throne in the disorder. David, believing Ziba, transferred all of Mephibosheth's land to Ziba on the spot. It is a painful moment. David, under pressure, making a decision without hearing both sides. But then the coup failed. David returned to Jerusalem, and 2 Samuel 19:24-30 records what happened when Mephibosheth came to meet the returning king. The text shows he had not trimmed his beard or washed his clothes from the day David left until the day David returned. These were signs of mourning, of solidarity, not of someone plotting to reclaim a throne. He had been grieving his king's absence. Mephibosheth told David that Ziba had deceived him. He acknowledged that David had already given the land to Ziba, and then he said something remarkable. He said, "Let him take it all. For my lord, the king has come home safely. That is enough." Notice what that reveals about what the table had meant to him. The land was not the point. The belonging was the point. The kindness was the point. He had been a dead dog in Lo Debar. David had spoken 4 words and changed everything. Whatever happened with the property, none of that erased what David had done, and Mephibosheth knew it. David split the land between the 2 men. It is not a clean resolution. It is the kind of messy, imperfect outcome that real life produces. David did not fully right the wrong. But Mephibosheth was still at the table. He was still there. Now, here is the takeaway from this story that I think is worth sitting with. Mephibosheth did nothing to earn his seat. He had no leverage. He had no achievements to offer. He had no standing in the new kingdom. The covenant David kept was not with Mephibosheth. It was with Jonathan. Mephibosheth was the recipient of a promise made before he was old enough to understand it. He came to the table not because he had performed well enough, but because someone who loved his father decided to act on that love. That is what the word Hesed carries. It is a kindness that moves toward the undeserving not because they have qualified themselves, but because the giver chose to be faithful to a promise. For anyone who feels outside of something, whether that is a community, a faith tradition, a family, or even a sense of their own worthiness, this story holds a very specific kind of comfort. The seat did not come after Mephibosheth sorted himself out. The seat came first. The belonging came before the restoration of the land. David spoke the welcome before Mephibosheth had done anything at all except show up scared. Grace in Scripture does not tend to wait for readiness, it tends to create it. Mephibosheth is mentioned one last time in 2 Samuel 21. He is still there, still connected to the household, still part of the story. The man who grew up in a place called no pasture ended his days with a seat at the table of a king. That is a complete arc. From hiding to belonging, from Lo Debar to Jerusalem, from dead dog to son. Now I want to ask you something for the comments below. Think about a moment when you felt like you were on the outside looking in. Maybe it was in a church, a family, a workplace, somewhere you expected to be rejected before you could even speak. Did someone offer you a seat before you earned it? Or have you ever been the one to offer that kind of seat to someone else? Leave your answer below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to read today.